What happens when a man who commands the sky, a billionaire visionary who built an empire from code and ambition, is thrown to the curb with nothing but the clothes on his back? Julian Thorne, the king of Silicon Valley, loses it all. His company, his penthouse, his name, all stolen by a venomous betrayal. Left with only pennies and shame, he finds himself in a 24-hour diner, a ghost haunting a coffee cup. He's invisible to the world, but he's not invisible to her. A simple waitress, burdened by her own secrets, is about to do something that, in a few terrifying seconds, will change everything and ignite a war for revenge. The air in the 60th floor boardroom of Thorne Dynamics was so thin it felt manufactured. It was of course. Julian Thorne, founder, CEO, and resident Sun King of the tech world, had personally overseen the filtration system. It was programmed to pump a subtle, proprietary blend of oxygen and aerosolized peppermint to optimize cognitive function. Julian, a man who looked less like a tech nerd and more like a Roman emperor, sculpted from marble, stood before the panoramic window. His back was to the 10-person board, his hands clasped behind him. He wore a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, the color of a thunderstorm. Below him, the Golden Gate Bridge pierced the fog, a tiny red toy. "The Ethernet," Julian said, his voice resonating with the baritone of absolute certainty, "is not a product. It is a paradigm. It is a decentralized, unhackable network that will make every data server on this planet obsolete. It is, in short, the future. And we," he turned, his ice-blue eyes sweeping the table, "will be the ones to sell it." He looked at his right-hand man, Marcus Vance, the CFO. Marcus, pale and meticulous, nodded sharply. He looked at his fiancée, Serafina Darcy, who sat on the board not because of her business acumen, but because her family name opened doors in old Europe that even Julian's billions couldn't. She blew him a subtle kiss. "The numbers, Marcus," Julian commanded. Marcus Vance stood. He pushed his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose. "Julian, the numbers are troubling." A flicker of annoyance. "Troubling? Marcus, the pre-launch projections are astronomical." "I'm not talking about the projections," Marcus said, his voice suddenly cold. He gestured. A phalanx of lawyers, men Julian had never seen before, entered the room. "I'm talking about the current numbers, specifically the $3.4 billion transferred from our R&D holdings to a series of offshore accounts. Accounts registered in your name." The peppermint-scented air suddenly felt thick, unbreathable. Julian's smile didn't falter, but it became a rictus. "What?" he said, the word a low growl. "Did you just say?" "We have the wire transfers, Julian," said a new voice. It was Serafina. She stood, her face a mask of tragic, practiced sorrow. I hired a private investigator. I thought you were just stressed. I never dreamed." She produced a handkerchief and dabbed at a perfectly dry eye. "Serafina? Marcus? What is this?" Julian's mind, a machine that processed quantum physics before breakfast, was skidding, failing to find purchase. "It's an emergency vote of no confidence," Marcus said, distributing folders. "The board is removing you as CEO, effective immediately, pending a full SEC investigation into your embezzlement of Thorne Dynamics." The room tilted. Julian looked from face to face. The board members, his board, wouldn't meet his gaze. They stared at the evidence in front of them. Flawless, intricate forgeries of his digital signature, encrypted email chains he never sent, audio logs spliced from a dozen different meetings. "This is a lie," Julian whispered, the blood draining from his face. "Marcus, you know this is a lie. Tell them." Marcus just adjusted his tie. "Security will see you out, Mr. Thorne. Your assets, including your personal accounts tied to company stock, are frozen." "Serafina!" he roared, a wounded lion. We're getting married." Serafina looked at him, the sorrow vanishing, replaced by a glacial contempt. "I can't believe I ever loved a thief." 2 security guards, men he paid 6 figures a year to protect him, took his arms. He didn't fight. He was in shock. He was walked out of the boardroom, through the lobby filled with his employees, and into the elevator. The ride down the 60 floors was a silent, crushing descent into hell. The fallout was instantaneous. The story was everywhere. The Thorne betrayal. Silicon Valley's Icarus Falls. Billionaire thief. His face was plastered across the Wall Street Journal and every gossip rag. His life evaporated. The penthouse access was denied. His bespoke Tesla, a custom model that wasn't even on the market, was repossessed from the street. His friends vanished. His phone, which was, of course, a Thorne Dynamics prototype, was remotely bricked. He went from the penthouse to a suite at the Four Seasons, using the emergency American Express he kept separate. That lasted 3 days before the freeze hit it. From the Four Seasons to a Marriott. From the Marriott to a sterile airport Hyatt. From the Hyatt, when his last bit of physical cash ran out, to the Driftwood Motel, a concrete box off the highway that smelled of bleach and despair. Weeks turned into a month. Julian Thorne, the man who dined with presidents and redesigned the modern world, was now unrecognizable. He was gaunt, unshaven, haunted. He had one change of clothes, his boardroom suit, now stained and rumpled. He had walked for miles, aimless, until the cold November rain drove him into the one place that was warm and demanded nothing of him. A 24-hour diner called the Nightingale. He sat in a booth, the vinyl cracked like old leather. He had exactly $2.50 in his pocket. He ordered a black coffee. It was bitter, burnt, and the most real thing he'd tasted in his life. He had lost everything. He was no one. And as he stared at his own fractured reflection in the dark, swirling liquid, he truly, completely gave up. Elena Sanchez believed the world was divided into 2 types of people, those who poured the coffee and those who drank it. She was, and had always been, a pourer. Her life was a repeating loop, choreographed to the hiss of the espresso machine and the clatter of heavy ceramic plates. She worked the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift at the Nightingale Diner, a job that paid just enough to cover the rent on their tiny apartment in the Mission and the specialized groceries for her brother, Leo. After her shift, she'd catch a bus across town for her second job, a catering gig with sterling events, where she'd trade her comfortable sneakers for agonizing black flats and serve microscopic appetizers to people who wouldn't look her in the eye. The Nightingale was her sanctuary. It was a time capsule of chrome, neon, and the faint, permanent scent of bacon grease. Her regulars were a cast of lonely souls. There was Officer Dan, who came in at 3 a.m. for his usual, a steak and eggs that would kill a lesser man. There was Ms. Petunia, a woman in her 70s with fading purple hair, who would read tarot cards for the truckers in exchange for a slice of apple pie. Elena was sharp, tired, and possessed a quiet empathy that was both her greatest strength and her most profound weakness. She saw the stories in everyone, and for the past 4 nights, she had been watching a new story. He'd come in just after the late-night rush, just before the pre-dawn quiet. He wore a suit that was falling apart, but she recognized the cut. She'd served enough canapes at Sterling events to recognize a Tom Ford, even one that had been slept in for a month. He was a ghost. He sat in the last booth, the one with the flickering light, and ordered 1 black coffee. He would nurse it for 3, sometimes 4 hours. He never spoke. He just stared, sometimes at the wall, sometimes at his own hands, as if he couldn't understand what they were. Elena knew broken when she saw it. The nightingale was a magnet for it. But this man was different. He wasn't just broke. He was shattered. He was a high-rise building that had been imploded, and he was sitting in his own dust. Tonight was the 5th night. The rain was lashing against the windows. He came in, dripping, his shoulders slumped. "Black coffee?" Elena asked gently. He just nodded, sliding into the booth. She brought it over. "Pie's fresh," she offered. "Apple's still warm." He looked up at her. His eyes were the color of a frozen lake, and just as deep. For a second, she saw a spark of something, a calculation. Then it was gone, extinguished by a wave of profound weariness. "Just the coffee," he whispered. His voice was rough, like gravel. Elena nodded and left him be. She went about her work, wiping the counter, refilling the salt shakers, ringing up Officer Dan. But she kept an eye on the man in the booth. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 things. The first was a handful of change, which he counted meticulously. The second was a piece of metal and glass. It wasn't a phone she recognized. It was sleek, black, seamless, and utterly dead. He set it on the table and just stared at it. He'd rest his forehead on his hand, his gaze fixed on that dark rectangle, as if it held all the answers to the universe, or was the cause of all its problems. Elena's heart ached. She knew this look. It was the look of rock bottom. She was wiping down the milkshake machine when she saw him check his watch, a beautiful, classic timepiece that was probably worth more than her car. Then he looked at the check she'd left him. 2050 hours. He looked at the small pile of change on his table. He began to count it again. He was short. Elena watched as the man's shoulders, which already seemed to be carrying the world, sank another foot. He scrubbed his face with his hands, a gesture of such utter, hopeless humiliation that Elena had to look away. She took a breath. She walked over to her register, punched a few buttons, and pulled $1 from her own tip jar. She walked back to his booth. He didn't look up as she approached, too lost in his own shame. Quietly, she reached down and picked up the small green check. He flinched, finally looking up, his eyes wide with a panicked, cornered look. Elena gave him a small, tired smile. "This one's on the house," she said, her voice low. "Looks like you're having a rough night." The man just stared at her. The gesture of simple, anonymous kindness seemed to short-circuit his brain. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "It's been a rough life," he finally managed to say. "Those'll happen," she said, pocketing the check. "You stay warm, okay?" She turned and walked away. Julian Thorne watched her go. He felt a strange, painful cracking in his chest. He hadn't been shown a single ounce of kindness in over a month. He'd been a king, and no one had been kind. Now he was a beggar, and a waitress had saved him from the humiliation of being 40 cents short. The weight of it all pressed down on him. The rain had stopped. He needed air. He stood up, his legs stiff. He threw his last few coins on the table, a tip he couldn't afford, but had to leave. Lost in his fog of despair, he walked past the counter, pushed open the glass door, and stepped out into the cold, damp, pre-dawn air. He didn't realize he'd left the single most important object of his former life sitting on the vinyl booth. Elena was bussing the table from a group of rowdy college students when she saw it, the dark, sleek rectangle sitting alone in the last booth. The ghost's phone. "Hey," she called out, grabbing it. She ran to the door and pushed it open, the little bell above it jangling frantically. "Sir," Hey, wait! He was already halfway down the block, a tall, dark silhouette against the greying pavement. "Sir!" she yelled, louder this time. He stopped. He turned around slowly, his expression confused, as if he'd forgotten who he was or why he was being summoned. Elena ran up to him, breathless, the cold air stinging her cheeks. She held out the device. "You forgot. This." Julian looked at the object in her hand. The Helios, the prototype, the physical manifestation of his Ethernet project, the sum of his genius, the thing that had cost him his life. A bitter, broken laugh escaped his lips. It was a terrible sound, rusty and frail. "It's a brick," he said, his voice hollow. He didn't take it. "It's a $10 million paperweight, a monument to my failure. Keep it. Sell it for parts. It doesn't matter." He started to turn away. Elena looked at the strange device. It was beautiful, but he was right. It was dead. She'd seen guys come in with broken tech before. "I don't know," she said, mostly to herself. "It looks important." Then a thought, a simple, helpful thought. "My brother Leo," she said. He's a wizard with this stuff. He can make any brick talk. He's a wizard with code." Julian froze. His back was still to her. The world, which had been a muffled, grey, meaningless fog, suddenly snapped into sharp, agonizing focus. A wizard with code. Those 5 words. They pierced the armor of his despair. They bypassed the grief, the rage, the humiliation. They hit the core of who he was, the creator, the builder, the problem solver. His mind, dormant for weeks, sparked. It was a cold, alien feeling. It was the feeling of a dead engine suddenly, violently, turning over. Code. He needs a coder. The Helios wasn't just a brick. It was a fortress. He had designed its security. It was locked with a biometric failsafe tied to his voice and retinal scan, and a quantum encryption key that was supposed to be unbreakable. But inside that fortress, inside, on a partitioned, offline drive, was his dead man's switch, a secret folder. It contained his original, time-stamped files for the Ethernet. It contained his private logs, his video diaries detailing its creation. It contained, he prayed, enough raw data to prove he was its author. He had been so broken, so convinced he had nothing, that he had forgotten the one thing he always built into his systems: a vault. He turned around. The seconds were happening. He looked at Elena, really looked at her, for the first time. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a woman with tired eyes, a name tag that read Elena, and a smudge of ketchup on her apron. And she was, potentially, his only way back. "Your brother," he said, and his voice was different. The gravel was gone. It was replaced by a sharp, focused intensity that made Elena take an involuntary step back. "How good is he?" Elena blinked, thrown by the sudden, terrifying shift in his entire demeanor. The ghost was gone. A general had taken his place. "He's very good," she said, suddenly defensive. "He's brilliant. People haven't always been fair to him, but he can do anything with a computer." Julian took the Helios prototype from her hand. His grip was sure. "My name is Julian Thorne." The name hit Eleanor like a physical slap. Julian Thorne, the billionaire thief, the man all over the news. She was standing on a dark street at 4 a.m., talking to the most infamous man in America. Her first instinct was to run. "I know what you've heard," he said, seeing the panic in her eyes. "And every single word of it is a lie. I was set up. My company. My future. My entire life. It was stolen from me by the 2 people I trusted most in the world." He held up the Helios. "This is the proof. This is my work, but it's locked. I'm locked out of my own life. You said your brother, Leo. You said he's a wizard. I need a wizard, Elena." He was desperate, but the despair was gone. It was a cold, calculating desperation now. It was the desperation of a man who saw one tiny, impossible chance. "I don't have any money," he said, the admission raw. "I have nothing. But if your brother can get this open, if he can unlock what's inside, I can get it all back, and I will not forget the person who helped me." Elena's mind was racing. This was insane. This was dangerous. This man was either a delusional paranoid or the victim of the biggest corporate conspiracy in history. Her gut, the one honed by years of reading people at 3 a.m., was screaming at her. And it was screaming that he was telling the truth. She thought of Leo, alone in his room, his own brilliance wasted, shut out from the world that didn't understand him. She looked at this man, shut out from the world he had built. He doesn't like new people," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "He's not. He stays home. He has severe anxiety." "I won't overwhelm him," Julian said, his tone softening, sensing her hesitation. "I'll explain. Please, Elena. You have no reason to trust me, but I'm asking you to." Elena looked down the dark street, then back at the diner, her place of safety. Then she looked at the fallen king in front of her. "My shift ends in an hour," she said, making a decision that would rewrite her future. "I'll be out at 6. Meet me on this corner." She turned and walked back into the diner, her heart hammering against her ribs, the little bell above the door announcing her return to a life that would never, ever be simple again. At 6:05 a.m., the first weak, grey light of dawn was breaking over the city. Elena emerged from the diner, having swapped her apron for a thin jacket. Julian was there, just as he said he would be. He looked less like a ghost now, and more like a soldier waiting for orders. The bus ride to her apartment was silent and fraught. Julian, a man used to being whisked through cities in a Maybach, sat stiffly on the plastic seat, his knuckles white as he gripped the Helios prototype. Elena kept stealing glances at him, her mind oscillating between "I'm helping a visionary" and "I'm harboring a federal fugitive." Her apartment building was a pre-war walk-up, with a finicky lock and hallways that smelled of old spices and dust. They climbed 4 flights of stairs. "It's not much," she warned, stopping at 4B. "It's a fortress," Julian replied, looking at the deadbolts on her door. She let them in. The apartment was small, but meticulously clean. It was dominated by one thing: books. They were everywhere, stacked on shelves, on the floor, on the tiny kitchen table. "Leo," Elena called softly. "I'm home, and I've brought someone. He needs help. It's a computer thing." There was a silence from the back room. Then a low voice, hesitant. I don't do computer things for strangers, Lena. I know, Leo, but this is different. This is important. Please." Another pause. Then the click of a lock, and the door to the back bedroom opened a crack. Julian's first glimpse of Leo Sanchez was a pair of intelligent, terrified eyes peering from a darkened room. Leo was a young man, maybe 21, with Elena's dark hair, but he was thin and pale from lack of sunlight. His room was his universe, and what a universe it was. Julian stepped inside, and his jaw nearly dropped. It wasn't just a bedroom, it was a command center. There were at least 6 monitors of varying sizes and vintages, some stacked on books, others bolted to the wall. Wires snaked across the floor in organized bundles. An old-school server rack, salvaged from a scrapyard, hummed in the corner. Leo sat in a high-backed gaming chair, wrapped in a blanket, his gaze fixed on Julian. "You're him," Leo whispered, his eyes flicking to the Helios in Julian's hand. "You're Julian Thorne." "I am," Julian said, deciding that honesty was the only play. "They say you stole billions." "They're wrong," Julian said flatly. "I was framed by my CFO and my fiancée. They stole my company, and they used my work to do it." Leo's eyes flicked to the device. "That's it, isn't it? The Helios, the Ethernet protocol. They said it was a myth, a vaporware project to inflate stock." "It's real," Julian said. He stepped forward and placed the prototype on Leo's desk, next to a keyboard that was worn smooth. "And everything I need to prove it is locked inside. My security, a biometric voice and retinal scan, plus a 4096-bit quantum encryption key." Leo's fingers, which had been drumming nervously on his desk, went still. He looked at the Helios, then at Julian, then at Elena. A slow smile, the first Julian had ever seen from either of them, spread across his face. "Quantum?" Leo said, his voice gaining a sudden, surprising spark of confidence. "That's just a fancy word for a really, really big lock. Every lock has a key, Mr. Thorne." "Julian," Julian corrected. "Julian." Leo's fingers hovered over his keyboard. This is beautiful. The chassis is cold-forged titanium, isn't it? But they were stupid. They left the primary I/O port accessible." "It's a diagnostic port," Julian said, impressed. "It shouldn't allow root access." "It shouldn't," Leo scoffed. He plugged a cable from his own custom-built rig into the device. A waterfall of black and green code filled his main screen. "You built the castle, Julian, but I'm the guy who knows where the sewer grate is." For the next 2 hours, Julian watched a master at work. It wasn't just coding, it was art. It was a digital siege. Leo's fingers flew, typing in languages Julian hadn't seen used in a decade, raw assembly, C++, and custom scripts that Leo was apparently writing as he went. "He's bypassing the biometric hardware checks," Julian murmured, half to himself, half to Elena, who stood in the doorway with coffee. "He's not breaking the lock. He's convincing the device the lock was never there." "I told you," Elena whispered back, a fierce pride in her eyes. "He's a wizard." After 2 hours, Leo hit a wall. The screen flashed red. "Access denied. Q-key protocol activated." "Damn," Leo muttered, sitting back. "There it is. It's firewalled itself. It's talking to a key that doesn't exist anymore." Julian's heart sank. The key was on the main Thorne Dynamics server, the one Marcus Vance now controls. It's gone. They were so close. "No," Leo said, his eyes narrowing. "It's not looking for a server. It's looking for a pattern. You coded this." "What's the pattern?" Julian closed his eyes, his mind racing back. The code. The late nights. It's based on a sequence. A private joke. It's the launch sequence from an old video game. The Last Starfighter. It's audio. Leo's face lit up. He turned to another monitor, his fingers flying. He pulled up an old 80s movie file, isolated the audio, and converted it into a raw data stream. "It's not just the audio," Julian said, the memory coming back. "It's the audio, played backwards, and run through a hash algorithm based on my mother's birthday." "Classically paranoid," Leo grinned. "March 12th, 1958, 031-21958. Julian stared. "How did you—" "You're a public figure, Julian. Your mother's birthday is on your Wikipedia page. It's the first password a rookie would try." Leo's fingers danced. He wrote a script. He fed in the reversed audio. He applied the hash. He hit enter. The screen flashed. Q key accepted. Biometric override complete. Welcome, administrator. The Helios whirred to life. Its screen lit up. no longer a dark mirror, but a vibrant, functioning interface. Julian felt his knees go weak. Elena gripped his arm. "You did it," Julian breathed. "Leo, you did it." "We're in," Leo said, his voice calm. But on his screen, Julian could see a new text file he was typing to his sister in a private window. "Holy Pennington, I'm in." "Now," Julian said, his voice hardening, "we find the dead man's switch." He directed Leo. "Folder, dev null and 0, a hidden partition. Inside a single file, Pennington protocol.dat. "Pennington?" Julian frowned. That's not what I called it." "Open it," Leo said. He did. It wasn't just Julian's Ethernet files. It was something else. A secret cache. It contained audio recordings, encrypted emails, bank transfers. But they weren't between Marcus and Serafina. They were between Marcus Vance and a man named Arthur Pennington. Julian felt the blood drain from his face. "No," he whispered. "It's not possible." Arthur Pennington, the grand old man of tech, a titan of industry, a philanthropic icon, a man whose public persona was somewhere between Warren Buffett and Albert Schweitzer. He was also Julian's mentor, the man who'd given Julian his first seed money, the man Julian revered as a father. Leo clicked the first audio file. A voice, smooth, patrician, and unmistakable, filled the small bedroom. It was Pennington. "Marcus, the board is aligned. Serafina has done her part. Julian is too reckless. He flies too close to the sun, and the Ethernet, that's too much power for one man. It's time to bring him to heel. The world needs a steady hand on that kind of technology. My hand. Proceed with the vote, and make sure the SEC investigation is thorough. He needs to be completely buried." Julian stumbled back, hitting the wall. It wasn't a coup by his CFO. It wasn't a betrayal by his greedy fiancée. They were just puppets. This was a patricide. The father figure he worshipped had ordered his execution. "Julian," Elena said, rushing to his side. Julian looked at her, his frozen blue eyes slowly turning to molten fire. The shock was gone. The grief was gone. All that was left was a pure, cold, perfect rage. "They didn't just steal my company," Julian Thorne said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "They tried to bury me." He looked at Leo. "Leo, how good are you at a fence?" Leo cracked his knuckles. "I've been waiting my whole life for someone to ask me that." The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Arthur Pennington. The man who had given Julian his first internship at 19. The man who'd attended his MIT graduation. The man who'd famously told Forbes, "Julian Thorne's mind is a national treasure." It was all a lie. Pennington hadn't wanted a protégé. He'd wanted an incubator. He'd let Julian do the impossible, and when the miracle was complete, when the Ethernet was stable, he'd hired scavengers to take the creator out. "He's giving a speech," Leo said, his fingers flying across the keys. Julian, Elena, and Leo were now huddled around the bank of monitors, fueled by coffee and a righteous fury. The tiny bedroom had become a war room. "What?" Julian snapped. "Arthur Pennington," Leo said, pulling up a web page. "He's the keynote speaker at the Apex Global Tech Summit in 2 days, right here in San Francisco at the Moscone Center." The Apex Summit was the Super Bowl of technology. It was the event. Every major CEO, every venture capitalist, and all the international press would be there. His speech, Leo read, is titled Odyssey, A New Dawn in Global Connectivity. "Odyssey," Julian spat. "He's renaming it. He's going to stand on that stage and announce my Ethernet as his own. He's not just burying me, he's dancing on my grave." "So what do we do?" Elena said, her voice firm. She wasn't just a worried sister anymore. She was part of this. "We have the audio file. We have the bank transfers. We can send it to the press." "No," Julian said instantly. "Pennington owns half the press. He'll have it buried as a deepfake or a smear campaign by a disgraced CEO. The SEC is in his pocket. Marcus and Serafina are his puppets. We can't just throw this rock. We have to drop the mountain on them. And we have to do it live." A plan began to form, the intricate, complex, beautiful architecture of a perfect counterattack. "Leo," Julian said, pacing the small room. "The Moscone Center, their AV system. Can you get in?" "From here?" "No, their system is air-gapped. It's not connected to the public internet during a keynote. It's a closed loop to prevent exactly what we're planning." "But if someone was inside," Julian asked. "If someone, say, plugged a USB drive into the main presentation server in the control booth," Leo said, a slow grin spreading, "I could install a Trojan horse, a listener, and once I'm in, I own the keynote, I own the teleprompters, I own the jumbotrons, I own Arthur Pennington." All eyes turned to Elena. She took a deep breath. "Sterling events," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. We're the caterers for the Apex Summit." Julian and Leo stared at her. "You're kidding," Leo said. "No, I'm on the list for the VIP green room shift. 2 days from now, I'll be backstage. I'll have access." It was perfect. It was terrifyingly perfect. "Elena, this is beyond dangerous," Julian said, his rage momentarily eclipsed by a wave of concern. "You'd be committing a felony. If you're caught—" "What are they going to do?" Elena said, a hard, unfamiliar edge to her voice. "Fire me from my minimum wage job? You think I'm scared of them? I'm scared of my brother's talent rotting in this room for the rest of his life because the world is run by men like Pennington. I'm scared of nothing changing. I'm in." Julian looked at her, a profound, aching respect filling his chest. He nodded. "Okay. Leo, you have 48 hours to build the most elegant, most vicious piece of code in history. It needs to be invisible, it needs to self-install, and it needs to give you absolute control." "Child's play," Leo said, already typing. "There's one more piece," Julian said, his mind turning to the final variable. "We need to control the narrative after the bomb drops. We need someone in that room who isn't on Pennington's payroll. Someone who's smart, hungry, and hates me just enough to be objective." He picked up Elena's old-fashioned landline. "I need to make a call. I'm going to need to borrow your car, Elena, and about $20 for a coffee." 24 hours later, Julian was sitting in a crowded, noisy coffee shop miles from the diner. He was clean-shaven, his hair slicked back. Elena had taken him to a thrift store and bought him a $20 blazer and a clean shirt. He looked less like a bum and more like a struggling professor. A woman with a sharp bob and sharper eyes walked in. She spotted him, and her expression soured. Sarah Jenkins, the most feared tech journalist at Wired. She had been a thorn in Julian's side for years, the only journalist who'd ever called his arrogance a market liability. "Thorne," she said, not sitting. "You look like hell." "Sarah, good to see you too. Buy you a coffee?" "I'm not here for coffee. Your message said you had the story of the decade and that you were innocent. You've got 5 minutes to convince me this isn't a pathetic, delusional plea." Julian leaned forward. "It's not my plea. It's my evidence. What if I told you the Ethernet was real? I'd say you're lying. What if I told you Arthur Pennington framed me to steal it?" Sarah paused. That gave her a moment's hesitation. "Pennington, that's a bold accusation. You're accusing a saint." "He's not a saint. He's a monster, and I'm going to prove it. Live, on stage, at the Apex Summit." "How?" I can't tell you, but I can tell you what's going to happen. Arthur Pennington is going to walk on that stage and present Odyssey. It's my Ethernet. And when he does, I have a surprise. It's going to be the single biggest corporate implosion in history, and I'm giving you the exclusive. Sarah studied him. She saw the old, arrogant Julian, but it was tempered by something new, something raw and real. He wasn't posturing. Why me, Julian? Why not the Journal or the Times? Because they'll wait for confirmation, Julian said. They'll run it by their legal department. They'll call Pennington for comment. You'll just run with it. You trust your gut. And you've always wanted to see me get what I deserve. And what do you deserve? I used to think it was the world, Julian said, his voice quiet. Now, I'll settle for revenge. He pulled out a small, cheap burner phone. I'm going to send you a text message tomorrow at exactly 2:15 p.m. It will be one word. Now. When you get it, I don't care what you're doing, you pull out your phone, you go live, and you point it at the stage. Don't look away. Don't even blink. Sarah Jenkins stared at him for a long, silent minute. Her journalistic instincts were screaming. This was either the biggest waste of her time or the story that would win her a Pulitzer. If you're lying to me, Thorne, she said, if I go live and it's just you screaming in the audience, I will personally destroy what's left of your reputation. I will salt the earth. Fair enough, Julian said, standing up. See you at the show, Sarah. He walked out of the coffee shop, his $20 blazer feeling more like armor than his old $5,000 suits. The Moscone Center was buzzing. It was a cathedral of technology, filled with thousands of attendees, journalists and investors. Giant banners hung from the ceiling, all bearing the logo of the Apex Summit and the face of one man, Arthur Pennington. Backstage in the VIP green room, Elena Sanchez was a nervous wreck. Her hands, usually so steady when balancing a tray of champagne flutes, were trembling. Tucked into the waistband of her black uniform trousers, beneath her jacket, was a simple, nondescript USB drive. On it was Leo's Trojan Horse, a piece of code he had lovingly named Nightingale's Song. She had one job: get to the AV control booth, a small guarded room on the other side of the backstage area, and plug it in. Sanchez! More champagne! Pennington's people are thirsty, her manager barked. Elena nodded, her heart hammering. She grabbed a tray. This was her chance. The green room was connected to a service corridor that ran behind the main stage. The control booth was at the far end. She slipped into the corridor. It was dark, chaotic, filled with technicians and stagehands. She kept her head down, walking with purpose, balancing the tray. Whoa, hold up! A massive security guard stepped in front of her, blocking the path. He had a headset and a clipboard. This corridor is restricted, talent and tech only. Oh, I'm so sorry, Elena said, her voice high and squeaky. She could feel the USB drive pressing into her back. They called for more champagne in the control booth. For the AV guys? The guard's eyes narrowed. The AV guys? They're drinking champagne? They said, the keynote's in 10 minutes. We need the good stuff, Elena improvised, her mind racing. The guard grunted, unconvinced. Let me see your pass. Elena's pass was a low-level catering pass. It wouldn't get her anywhere near the booth. This was it. She was going to fail. Just as he reached for her badge, a voice bellowed from down the hall. Where is my sugar-free Red Bull? Does anyone in this God-forsaken place know how to read a rider? It was Seraphina Darcy, sweeping into the corridor like a tempest, her red dress a slash of color in the gloom. She was trailed by a flustered-looking assistant. The security guard's attention snapped to the new, more important problem. "Ma'am, this area is—" "Do I look like I care what this area is?" Serafina snapped. "Get me my drink or I will have your job. Do you know who I am?" As the guard turned to deal with the famous fiancé of the new, as she was billing herself, King of Tech, Marcus Vance, Elena seized her moment. She ducked under the guard's outstretched arm and practically ran down the corridor. She didn't look back. She found the door. AV control. Keynote. It was slightly ajar. She slipped inside. It was empty. 2 technicians were likely outside, dealing with the fallout from Serafina's tantrum. Elena saw it. The main presentation tower. A black server with a glowing green light, and on the front, an open USB 3.0 port. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely get the drive out of her waistband. She fumbled with it, dropping it. It clattered on the floor. She gasped, scooped it up, and jammed it into the port. A small LED on the drive flashed, once, twice, then went solid. In their tiny apartment 4 miles away, a line of text appeared on Leo's screen. "Nightingale is singing." "I'm in." "Yes," Leo breathed. "Elena, get out of there. Get out now." Elena ripped the drive out, shoved it in her pocket, and slid back out the door, melting into the chaos of the corridor, just as the technicians were returning. She grabbed an empty tray and walked calmly back toward the green room, her heart threatening to burst from her chest. In the main auditorium, Julian Thorne stood in the back, in the standing room only section, reserved for low-level press. He clutched his burner phone. His eyes were fixed on the stage. He spotted Sarah Jenkins in the front row press pit, her laptop open, her phone on the table. She caught his eye and gave him a tiny, skeptical, "You better not be kidding" nod. The lights went down. A dramatic orchestral score swelled. The jumbotrons lit up with a slick video, nebulas, data streams, and finally, the word Odyssey. Arthur Pennington walked onto the stage to a thunderous standing ovation. He was the image of a benevolent patriarch, grey hair, a kind smile, a simple, expensive dark blue suit. He looked like the man who would save the world. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm and familiar. "Thank you. What a day. What a moment. For centuries, humanity has been disconnected. We have lived on digital islands. Today that ends. Today I am proud to give you Odyssey." He began his presentation. The slides, projected on the massive screen behind him, showed graphs and projections. Julian's graphs. Julian's projections. "Odyssey is not just a network," Pennington continued. "It is a new... He paused. He looked at the teleprompter. It had flickered. He squinted, confused. The text had changed. In Leo's apartment, Leo's fingers were a blur. "Showtime," he whispered. The teleprompter now read, "Julian is too reckless. Julian flies too close to the sun. Pennington, a true professional, tried to recover. A new paradigm, But his eyes were glued to the words only he could see. In the back, Julian saw the hesitation. He saw the sweat on Pennington's brow. He pulled out his phone. He sent the text to Sarah Jenkins. "Now." Sarah's head snapped up. She grabbed her phone, hit "Go Live," and aimed it at the stage. "Ask him about the Ethernet, Arthur," Julian shouted, his voice ringing out in the momentary silence. The crowd turned. Security guards immediately began to converge on Julian's position. "Arthur," Julian yelled, louder. "Ask him about Thorne Dynamics. Ask him why you buried me." "Security!" Pennington yelled, his composure finally cracking. Get that disturbed man out of here. He's a disgraced criminal." "Am I?" Julian roared as the guards grabbed his arms. "Or am I the man you stole it all from?" "It's time to bring him to heel," Leo whispered, and he hit the enter key. The Odyssey logo on the giant screen behind Pennington flickered. It stuttered, and then it was replaced by a giant black audio waveform. And then Pennington's own voice, amplified to fill every corner of the massive auditorium, echoed out. "Julian is too reckless. He flies too close to the sun. It's time to bring him to heel. The world needs a steady hand on that kind of technology." My hand. Proceed with the vote. Make sure the SEC investigation is thorough. He needs to be completely buried. A collective gasp went up from the thousands of people. Pennington went white as a sheet. This is a fabrication, a deep fake. Shut it down now. But the technicians in the booth were powerless. Leo had locked them out. The audio file ended. It was replaced by something new. Bank statements, wire transfers, from Arthur Pennington's charitable foundation to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, and then transfers from that corporation to two individuals, Marcus Vance and Serafina Darcy. In the front row, where they sat as guests of honor, Serafina let out a small, strangled scream. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. They both stood up and made a dash for the exit. "Don't let them leave!" Sarah Jenkins screamed, pointing her phone at them. The security guards, the real Moscone Center security, not Pennington's private team, blocked the aisle. On stage, Arthur Pennington was frozen. The teleprompter now had a new message, just for him. "Smile, Arthur. You're on camera." The screen changed again. It showed the encrypted emails between Marcus and Pennington, now fully decrypted, detailing the entire conspiracy. The plan to forge the data. The plan to bribe the board members. The plan to feed the false information to the SEC. It was all there. Undeniable. The room was in chaos. The press pit was a sea of flashing cameras and shouting journalists. Julian had been released by the guards, who were now staring, dumbfounded, at the stage. He walked slowly down the center aisle, the crowd parting for him as if he were Moses. He walked all the way to the front and stood, looking up at the stage at the man who had been his father. Pennington looked down at him, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. Julian just shook his head, a single, sad gesture. "You taught me everything, Arthur," Julian said, his voice quiet, though it was picked up by the dozens of hot mics. "You taught me how to build an empire, but you forgot to teach me how to spot a snake in a bespoke suit." Pennington's legs gave out. He collapsed onto the stage, a broken old man, as the first police officers, alerted by the live stream, began to enter the auditorium. The aftermath was a media firestorm. "The Resurrection of Julian Thorne" was the Wall Street Journal's headline. "Tech Titan's treachery," screamed the Times. The SEC, in a desperate attempt to save face from its own colossal, conspiracy-fueled blunder, came down on Pennington, Marcus, and Serafina with the force of a tectonic plate. The trio's assets were frozen. Pennington was facing decades in prison for market manipulation, conspiracy, and fraud. Marcus, in a bid for a lighter sentence, sang like a canary, detailing every single crime. Serafina, stripped of her glamour and her stolen wealth, became a tabloid caricature. For Julian, the path was cleared. The board of Thorne Dynamics was purged. The company, now leaderless and toxic, offered him his CEO chair back, unconditionally. He declined. Thorne Dynamics was tainted. It was built on his arrogance and destroyed by another's greed. He let it be broken up and sold for parts. His real work was just beginning. 3 months later, a new company was registered in the state of California, Helios Innovations. Its headquarters was not a 60-story glass tower. It was a renovated brick warehouse in a modest, up-and-coming neighborhood. It was filled with natural light, open-source computers and a giant state-of-the-art server room. The CEO's office was a simple glass-walled room with a standing desk. Inside, Julian Thorne looked over a new design. There was a knock. "You wanted to see me, boss?" Elena Sanchez walked in. She was no longer in a waitress uniform. She wore a sharp blazer, her hair pulled back, and carried a tablet. She was the new Chief Operations Officer of Helios Innovations. "I did, Ms. Sanchez." Julian smiled. "How is our new CTO adjusting?" "He's adjusting," Elena laughed. "He's demanded we paint his entire office void black, and that all meetings be conducted via text, but he's already optimized our entire network infrastructure. He's happy." "Good." Julian looked at her, his expression serious. "The first round of funding closed. Our Ethernet venture is now valued at $50 billion, and that's before we've even sold anything." "It's a good start," Elena said, her smile matching his. "The lawyers also finalized the settlement from the Thorne Dynamics liquidation. Your consulting fee for emotional distress and services rendered has been wired. You should check your bank account." Elena pulled out her phone. She logged in. She looked at the number. She sat down, hard. "Julian, that's 8 figures." "It's a start," he said, echoing her. "For you, for Leo, for everything you did. You're not a poorer anymore, Elena. Not unless you want to be." Elena was quiet for a moment. "Thank you, Julian. But you know the money's not why I'm here." "I know," he said softly. "It's why you're the only person on this planet I trust to run this place with me." That evening, they didn't go to a fancy restaurant to celebrate. They went to the Nightingale Diner. It was 2 a.m. It was quiet. They sat in the last booth, the one with the flickering light. Officer Dan was at the counter, and he nodded to Eleanor. "Evening, boss." Eleanor had bought the diner. She'd given the entire staff a raise and full health benefits, and she kept it open as a reminder. Julian slid a coffee cup across the table to her. "This one's on me. I'll hold you to that," she smiled. He put his hand over hers on the table. The simple gesture was more intimate than any kiss they could have shared. It was a gesture of equals, of partners. "You know," Julian said, "the media called me the Phoenix, rising from the ashes." "Apt," Eleanor said. "They're wrong," he said, his blue eyes meeting hers. "A phoenix rises alone. I was just ashes. You and Leo. You were the fire that brought me back." He reached into his new blazer pocket and pulled out a clean, crisp diner napkin. He took a pen from his shirt and began to sketch. A new idea. A new algorithm. "The Ethernet is finished," he said, his voice alive with that familiar, brilliant spark. "But I just had an idea for what to do with it. Something that could change medicine forever." He slid the napkin over to her. "Ready for round 2, partner?" Elena Sanchez, the waitress who had changed the world in a few seconds, looked at the billionaire who had found his life. She smiled, took the pen, and made a correction to his math. "Let's get to work." And so, the empire built on lies and betrayal came crashing down, all because of one small act of kindness in a 24-hour diner. Julian Thorne learned that losing everything was the only way to find what truly mattered. And Elena and Leo Sanchez proved that you don't need a penthouse or a billion-dollar name to change the world. All you need is a brilliant mind, a brave heart, and the courage to fight back. This story shows us that our lives can change in an instant, and that our greatest allies can be found in the most unexpected of places. Thank you for watching this incredible story. If you were on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button so we know you enjoyed it. What was your favorite twist, Let us know in the comments below. And if you love stories about revenge, redemption, and the underdog, make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. We have so many more stories like this one to share with you, and you won't want to miss a single one. Share this video with a friend who needs to be reminded that even in the darkest night, a new dawn is waiting. We'll see you in the next story.